Hello, everyone. This is week 9 of 2026. By the time you watch this episode, a convicted kidnapper and murderer in the names of Muhammad Sebufu will be at home having breakfast, lunch, or supper with maybe his children and family, while thousands of political prisoners are still spending their days and nights in prisons. And now, courtesy of a presidential pardon, Muhammad Sebufu is back at home after being convicted with murder and kidnap, and even the Court of Appeal not maintaining the conviction but reducing the sentence thereabouts. Now, on Friday this week, was pardoned by the president and is at home. Most of you have seen the videos going around him thanking the president and saying that he's thankful to the setup. This is a contrast of two tales, and we'll tell you more than that in this episode of the Checkmate. Today is a special edition. I am doing it alone. But for the previous episodes where I've had Nicholas and also wonderful men in the background, our producers, our director, and people who are behind the cameras, we want to thank you very much for making this happen. And of course, not forgetting you, the number one stakeholders of the Checkmate, people who are watching, sending in comments. Because if you are not doing what you are doing, we would definitely not be having or doing this that we are doing. I have a lot in stock for you. I just don't want to take much time, but these will be the most precious 30 or so minutes of your time. And by the time you finish this episode, you will know what has been going on in the Pearl of Africa. You'll feel enlightened, you'll feel closer to your community. And we just want to remind you and encourage you that we are all living for the first time. So no one is a master of this life. We're all trying this and that. So if stuff does not work out, please hold on to the pillar of hope, hold on to the faith, and know that the days to come for yourself, for your family, and your country are definitely greater than what you've seen, and even the days are past. We do this program to actually encourage the nation, point out what is wrong, applaud what is right, and hope for things to change by holding responsible those who are supposed to do what they are supposed to do by mandate, and collecting paychecks on the consolidated fund for the things that they are supposed to do. Now, for this week, we have a lot. And as I promised, I guarantee you, if you give me your 30 or so minutes, by the time we get done, you will know what is taking place in the Pearl of Africa. I have around 8 topics for you, but the hotter one, and I will begin straight away. What made headlines in Uganda was the story of the church and the state. You guys, by the time this week began, when we're closing into Sunday, we got the notice of what had been running in the week that Lubaga Cathedral was going to host prayers for Besigye and other political prisoners. Let me tell you a little bit of history actually concerning that, because on 24th February 1982, Oboti soldiers raided Lubaga Cathedral to disrupt mass and ordered the priests to stop praying, something that was a little bit political. Guys, on February 23rd, 2026, Museveni ordered the Archbishop of Lubaga Cathedral to postpone prayers for Kizza Besigye. It's like history keeps coming to mock us. Now, let me tell you a little bit of history with that. Now, people who are sympathizing with Dr. Kizza Besigye, who has been in prison for long, and subscribing to his cause, and whether you are for government or not, this sickly statesman who has been in prison on remand for long without bail, people said, he's sickly and elderly. Let's hold prayers for him and other political prisoners. And guys, everyone was shocked of, wow, they're going to let this happen. So we had Winnie Byanyuma, the spouse for Kizza Besigye, coming out to say this is happening. We had posters, we had order of mass coming out, and everyone was excited to say that the church was stepping out to do more, especially in the wake of the week where we were celebrating the Archbishop Janan Luwum. Now, for people who have been, how do I put this? For people who have been saying that we have an indolent church for matters concerning the state, we are excited about this happening. Come Monday this week, we received a notice, and in the address that was made by Winnie Byanyima, she communicated that the priest, and that's the Archbishop, had informed her that she had received a phone call from the president to hold the mass. So the Archbishop, of course, communicates to the administration of the church to send out a notice that the mass had been postponed. Now, we get to know on Monday, I think in the afternoon, that Winnie Byanyima had actually spoken to the president, and the president had promised to call her back about the mass, but she never got in touch with the president again, and that president did not return her calls. It's not a question of excess, it's a national importance matter, because where it ends is that the priest later clarified that the president had called and said, whatever I am hearing, that service is not going on. Now, in the discussion that we were having, and especially since the nation was coming through from the celebration of January Ruomo, who steps up and actually challenges power in what was going on in the Amin era, it was challenging, like people had more of an expectation. It's actually one of the stories that was covered by the Daily Monitor. I have a copy of it. And at one point, there was an open letter that was done by all bishops saying that what we are seeing the president do is not right. And the church was stepping out to say that we cannot have the things that people were running away in the previous regime come to happen. So the question for Ugandans has been, is the church doing more to participate in the things that make their flock comfortable? Because it's the flock that makes the nation. And where the church, I think it's Napoleon who says that religion is the compass. Like a nation without religion is like a ship without a compass. And it has direction. For the Bible readers, we know that the debate will always be, let the priest be the priest and let the king be the king. But the history also shows that if they are Christians, let me talk about Christians because that's what I know most, that the priests corrected the kings. And that also the same Bible that they believe in says that the church is not peripheral to the world, that it's the other way around. So there should be an influence that the church must have on the issues of the nation, that whilst you're preaching to people and whilst you're asking for offertory, these people are subject to the faults that are happening in this government. And that's where the complaint is coming about. Why are things going wrong and you do not use the pulpit to defend the position of what is the truth? Because what is the church without truth and justice? And where there are whims of injustice, what is the church doing about it? Now, the Church of Uganda has been in the crossfire on that issue because people have said that even the current Archbishop of the Church of Uganda will talk more about Arsenal than what is happening in the country Uganda, that the bishops are shut down because every consecration of an Anglican, or I should say Church of Uganda bishop, the president gives them a motor vehicle. That from there, it's very hard for them to be objective on where there's a form of injustice. I personally applaud the Archbishop of Lubaga for actually allowing to let this go on. And even in the communication, it's not like he was posing, he said, we are postponing. That strength for the church to sort of be a stone in the shoe to the wishes of the state is what is commended. Now, let me pick another point in history where I think it was following the attack on Rwenzururu Kingdom where there was a revolt, that the Catholic and the Church of Uganda, I think it was Bishop Nzerebende, tries to approach the palace to pray for the king and the Queen of Kasese. Remember how the police stopped them from doing their altar duties. But the discussion that will always stay on the mind is, can the church, even when you're including discussions of the apartheid in South Africa, the contribution of the church, everyone remembers Bishop Desmond Tutu, the civil rights movement in the US, everyone remembers Martin Luther. These were men of the collar, anointed men, as you might call it. But we forget, and that's a bigger discussion, we forget that even religion is affected when we do not stand up for the injustices that are happening. Everyone remembers the Muslim clerics that were killed. At first, people were arrested. We have had people on remand, not charged for long. Others have been charged. But then later investigations show that there was a hand in police. People were in police that were sometimes behind these murders. And that goes on and on. affecting the people of the church, the people of the mosque, and whatever you believe in without the participation. So the discussion of what happened in Lubaga on Monday was a reminder of the discussion of the church and the state and what needs to be done. And whichever side that you look at it, there's a place that church needs to, like, the church can't keep quiet when such injustices are going on. It's a story that we can wait to see. And it's an expectation that I think and personally feel that it's justified that the church needs to call out the state where it's, because the major problems are sins in the Bible. If you're talking about corruption, if you're talking about people being arrested in a wrongful manner. We had a Joseph who later became the prime minister. You are the Bible reader. Like, you can know that church has a role to play if the nation is to take a different direction, and it's not a role you surrender. And when the state says jump, you just ask how high without challenging and fighting for truth and justice for the people of God. So that's what one of the things that made headlines in this week, and we thought we would highlight it in the light of what happened at Lubaga and the prayers or the mass for Besigye and other political prisoners. Now, the other topic that made headlines in Uganda regards the KCCA plan to reorganize the Kampala city. The song Eno City Kampala and the description as you knew it might be changing a little bit. Everyone remembers that song, I think, in the early 2000s of Eno City Kampala. While it talked about the thieves then and says you must tighten the bag, that is still going on. And it's one of the stories that I will tell you about of over, actually, since we talked about that story and today, over 2,000 people have been arrested related to the crime surge that was happening in Uganda, in Kampala specifically. But what we're discussing today is the plan to evict bodas. The newspaper that I'm holding for the Daily Monitor on Feb 26th covered the story of the plan to evict bodas in Uganda. Part of the statistics that are covered there is that the city, now let me just discuss the replan as it should be. The replan that is affecting bodas and taxis in Kampala is, let's start with taxis. Whilst the taxis will stay, they are saying that the taxis should, and what is banned is that taxi street drops must stop. In other words, you'll have designated stages, and once you leave that stage, the taxi does not stop until its destination. Let me just qualify that. If you are at City Square and there's a stage, maybe if it survives, and you're going to Mutungo Bina, if it picks you there, it can only stop to its destination without touting, without making a stop to pick other passengers on the way. Part of the reorganization. The plan and the bigger plan, the discussion that was had by KCCA and the Ministry of Transport is that they will have companies led by Chira Motors to now roll out buses. I will tell you about the story of Pioneer buses a little bit later, but on this topic. But the plan is that if we can roll out buses and what they call light rails, small trains, that can easily fit in the city, you will make bus transport and rail transport very easy, that people will not need these taxis. Two, the challenge that people are complaining about, and which is a reflection of the voice that has been spoken about by the current mayor, Ediaso Lukwago, and the mayor-elect, Badimwezo, Engineer Badimwezo, is that let's take these things in a phased manner. Let me just go through the statistics. KCCA wants to gazette 929 stages across the city divisions. Now, the rest would go, because there's actually a specific number that should be on a stage. I'm talking about 929 stages, and they are saying on each stage, there must be only 30 bodas. I will do the math here. Lawyers and math. But 30 times 900 and... let me just do the math here. So 30 bodas per stage times 929 stages, that would leave only 27,870 bodas in Kampala. Now, there's a report according to URA that puts a number of bodas in Kampala over 1 million, if you do metropolitan. If they are going to work with 27,000 or thereabouts, then that means that there will be a surge of people who have nothing to do that have been replaced by the system. What the current Lord Mayor and the elect are saying is that what plan B are you putting for these people? And in your reorganization, where are the people? I will discuss more on that story because let me just cover the statistics that were covered by the monitor on that. One, the thing we note is the plan for buses and rails. Now, the person who was speaking on this on behalf of KCCA said that each division will have 185 stages with about 5,574 borders, and say, on each stage hosting 30 borders. I've already talked about that. The other thing I need you to note is the plan for buses and rail. I already talked about that, and they are banking on Chira Motors to manufacture buses by Uganda, build Uganda, guys. And then those buses will be the ones ferrying people in terms of Kayora EV electric bus. There can be many in the city to transport people and deal with the transport deficit that would be collected, that would be correcting the deficit of border borders. The other thing to note is the registration of riders. I think this is a plus and there's no debate. Now, the Daily Monitor says that Kampala State Minister Kawiye, Chofa Togabiye, told Daily Monitor that border riders will be forcefully chased away if they do not change willingly. And they have to just get out of the city. That's what they mean. It also, guys, talks about the creation of border-free zones, to say that there is not going to be an allowance for borders within the CBD. Let me give an example. That the last border can stop at Lugogo, and between Lugogo and Wandegea, there's no border whatsoever. You can think about planning your journeys moving forward, except for the stages that might be in between. If the 30 borders are done, we are discongesting and organizing the city. We must also understand and discuss that this is in the wake of what they did with street vendors. So the city, and of course, guys, we discussed this, saying that after the elections, there will be these drastic moves. We talked about vendors, we talked about borders, and we talked about the return of traffic fines on the road. That's the only thing that is remaining on the checklist. And we will be, as usual, the prophets that tell you what is going to happen. Now, the other thing is that, of course, the border guys are saying that for the 166 gazetted border stages, they are not enough. Where are the rest going to go? The perspective that I want to give you in terms of the borders and also tax returns is that the majority of the riders rent between 150,000 rentals to just manage Mbera. And people who have, and the other thing that I need to discuss is that one of the most booming businesses in Uganda that is done by many businesses is giving borders on hire purchase or border financing. And you'll be shocked how many borders. Let me just give you an example. You've seen the spiral borders, the electric ones. The average cost of it is 5 million. Boxers, 4 point something or something like that. So most of the people just take them on loan and they can maybe collect 30,000 or 40,000 in a day, remit the 20, keep the 20 to keep moving, and maybe in a period of 36 months or 24 months, they are done paying for the borders. There are very many people who are still servicing these loans within Kampala. And the bigger issue comes when we have abrupt planning of we won, and then there's no action, and then boom, we want to act on it within 1 month or 2 months like they did for the vendors. Give a strategic plan. And it's the problem that started as far as way back in 2008 when there was a ban on Bovera, when they said, guys, can we organize ourselves to say in 2 years, we will not be having Bovera? And how are we handling it? To say that if you are a plant, you have 24 months to run, and any after that, please look for anything else to produce. Instead of just waiting and say we are giving a 30 days ultimatum, we are no longer doing Bovera or Caveras, as people call polythene bags, so that people can have a chance to reorganize themselves in terms of sucking in the effects of restructuring. Guys, everyone knows that border business is a mess in Kampala. First of all, it contributes to crime. Second of all, on average, there are 14 accidents that happen within Kampala every day. So 14 families cry because of boda accidents in Kampala every day. That leaves a lot to be desired. Most of the crimes that are committed, they use boda escapes. And sometimes they travel on borders. Even when they grab something in traffic jam, they just jump on a border. One of the things where we have not had strict adherence to traffic rules within the city is also borders. You've been on traffic lights and they hit green and then border is crossing here and there. Sometimes you think that they contribute to too much disorganization of the city. If you're a first timer in Uganda, the first thing you will notice would be the borders. But whilst there's need to regulate that, and even why the previous attempts to ban failed, it goes to the implementation. And because as far as 2022, this plan was there and gets abandoned. We've talked about here something in the Checkmate to do with taxis, that one of the ways, and this is a suggestion to KCC, one of the ways that you can deal and organize the taxi transport, for starters, is giving a 6 months operating license after inspection. Let me tell you guys, I am very sure that if they did an inspection without corruption of the taxis that are fit for purpose, maybe the director will put old taxis, a sample of old taxis within the Kampala, and you see them on the side, the seats, the mechanical condition and etc. You would literally deal with half of the taxis that are operating in Kampala. And then you have people separate to say that someone sitting in that taxi is not sitting there by will, and it's what is available, and it's like they are raping their own dignity by just sitting, but they cannot let it go because of Mbeda. And you are a regulator and you're not doing anything to ensure that these things are perfect. That if it's a stranger sitting in a taxi, will say, what is the state of this city with these seats? We've seen some without a windscreen and they just put Kavera. And in the rain, the conductor will give you to hold and just go. And that's a city, and we allow that to go on. If we're talking about regularization, can we talk about minimum standard for every industry? I've here talked about previously guys that get licenses for garbage collection in Kampala. A truck is not covered. It's an open roof truck. When it passes, it's leaking. 15 minutes after it passes and you're just walking by, you will know that a garbage truck just passed around. What is wrong with getting minimum standards for each and everything of our industries? We've had people who have billboards encroaching on the road reserves. Why are you giving them licenses when among the requirements for licenses, there is an inspection of where the billboard is going to be? Some of these things that are on the billboards are PG rated. There are kids going around and you do not even regulate the content that is displaying on these. What is wrong with having minimum standards like we did for for butcheries, like we did for supermarkets, for bars? What is wrong by having minimum standards and having inspection team on the ground? Ministry of Health, UNBS. Why can't we have synergies that push these things instead of just waking up and say, let's do away with borders, and then boom, it's the next thing. My 15 minutes on this are done. I will have to move on, but it's something that we'll have to watch and see how it turns out, because many people are going to be affected. Many people. And as you've heard, because And actually, the funniest thing as I close this is that URA is supposed to be charging 20,000 on borders every year. So even the CG for URA was saying, yeah, whilst we know that we're supposed to be charging 20K per year for borders, and if there are 3 million borders, we'd be making some money. But he says the people who are compliant are even not a quarter of the border guys, because actually some guys don't know about that 20K. So they're not contributing to the tax. And we've also talked about this. If we're discussing a holistic approach to what is going on in Uganda, whilst the Ministry of Finance increases the tax collection target for URA every year. In fact, what they have set as a target for this year is almost double what was the target last year. Whilst URA is saying, for example, by the way, there's a waiver for URA right now. If you didn't file your returns, you file your returns and you can get a waiver, and I think it is expiring on the 1st of June or something like that. But whilst URA is putting all those incentives to make sure more people come in and be tax compliant, You can't talk about URA increasing its tax collections without expanding the tax base. What happens is that you have 10% of Ugandans who are tax compliant bear the burden of all the 50 million people. And URA is just devising means to tax those people more instead of expanding the base. And you guys spent the whole week talking about the URA truck that was remaining downtown when every other vendor had gone. But if they are doing tax education, if they are doing everything, why can't we talk about bringing more people and strategizing to bring more people under the tax base? And regularization of some of these sectors like boda, like taxis would be a very good start, because there are companies which are owned. There are people who are running this. You can tell these guys to say, you know, guys, form an association and we'll be dealing with an association. Association can have up to maybe 50 taxi drivers. Association will make sure that these taxis are up to standard. They will be remitting the taxes on behalf of the association, something like that, so that you have something that is working. You have a tax inlet there, you have a regularized city, you have standards and keeping the dignity of the people, you're reducing crime. You see, when you do things holistically, what happens? That is what we are advocating for. Now, topic 3. This now goes to news from Parliament. At the beginning of this week, the Public Accounts Committee, one of the people that were questioned by the Public Accounts Committee was the Secretary to the President in charge of RDCs. You know the gentleman, Haji Yunus Kakande. In fact, one of the most shocking revelations is that one of the members of the committee, Patrick Nsamba, who is the current member for Kasanda North, who has actually been re-elected. While in the hearing, the good Haji told him that, you see, even for you, the RDC called me saying, Gwe, Nsamba has won Kasanda North. He has just defeated the guy for NRM by a few votes. What should we do? Should we declare him or we declare the NRM guy? This was actually before a parliamentary committee, and that was the person who's saying, and it was fair to say, you guys, if he has won, why are you not declaring? And he says, but my colleagues were doing these things all over. So it talks a lot about those useless RDCs. By the way, I think it's still a useless office, and even the role that they were given heading the district security committees and what they do in enforcement of land evictions, the mess they do. It's one thing that I would do in my first 100 days as president, to make sure that the offices of the RDCs and deputy RDCs is not a reward for political failures and people who seek relevance before the president. It's a useless office, and it is just used to push for power and stamp a big foot of the state over the people. It should be banned, and it should never see the light of day in the next phase of Ugandan politics. The other example that Haji gave on before the parliamentary committee was that in the wake of the violence that happened in Zimbabwe, you remember Sechikubo and the old general, who you guys have been joking that among the certificates he presented to qualify as an MP was that it was a certificate for Mujiji. While he qualified to stand and EC said that academic qualifications were kawa, everyone remembers the violence that took place in Zimbabwe. Now, among the things, Haji says that he called the then, now the deceased Deus Sande, who was commanding the UPDF in the Masaka region, and he's saying, there's an influx of soldiers here that are beating up people. Where are they coming from? And the late commander, Sande Deus, said, I actually don't know where they are coming from, but I hear they've been deployed by some RDCs and some powerful people in the state. So in elections, you had deployments that were not sanctioned by police or UPDF, but some people who have like a small army they can call, and they will cause havoc in a place. And those are the elections. In fact, if you get that recording of the Public Accounts Committee, it should be, if Sechkuba is filing a petition, an election petition against Rwanshande, the first attachment before the DRR forms should be the recording of those, the hearing and the proceedings of the Public Accounts Committee, because there were revelations of state-sponsored and some person-sponsored violence in the district, and there's no victory that can be clean after that nonsense and havoc and people who were dying. They were talked about even in different districts, the influence of RDCs who would threaten the returning officers to declare some NRM candidates as winners, even when the results were saying otherwise. So it's one of the stories that made headlines in the corridors of Parliament and also crossed to the airwaves and print media. And we thought that it is very important to discuss that bit and know what is really going on in that front. And also, really, guys in the security forces and RDCs, shame on you, because people want systems that they can bank on. If it's a democracy, why is it a sham? Why wouldn't you save taxpayers' money and leave the election if you're just going to beat people into obedience and you say every 5 years we have elections? And also shame on the election observers that these things are coming out internally when the report was saying otherwise. It's like they are being mocked. And I think it's one of the notable election observers who says that observers are just observers. They just observe and the reports. It's like the African Union became a toothless lion that people just marvel at its mare, but it can't bite and hunt. And it's very sad that something that could have been beautiful and hold together the continent, that the things that were affecting a continent, is just now in the shadows of its former glory, if there was, and all the hope that was there, to just at least hold fellow leaders accountable. There should be something. There should be the bare minimum that we are talking about on this front, and actually in 2026. And it's a shame that these things are going on in Uganda and even some of the countries around. And we really hope for better days. Now, there's another story, which is my fourth, about the real estate market in Uganda. I'm really passionate about this because I have a positive bias on this. It's one of the stories that was covered by the New Vision of Thursday, February 2026. Observer did stories about why Museveni embraces sore losers, and as you can see, the picture in front is Yusuf Nsibambi, who has been a mouthpiece of forces of change and reconciliation. We'll talk about that. But to talk about the topic of real estate, guys, if you're in Uganda, you understand the realities of our real estate. One, the surging prices of the values of property, whether it's just bare land or buildings or arcades or rent. Now, by the time you watch this, maybe you will have a story of your first real estate was your hostel at campus, or when you were doing your diploma or tertiary education. And after campus, you had to look for a muzigo nearby, living a hostel life. And then after that, you start to work, you're looking for a minimum place to stay in and stuff like that. And then now you start to gather a little bit of money to sort of be independent and buy land. Now, if a 50 by 100 in an outskirt of Gayaza buys 15 million, if you're able to save 500,000 per month, you would need 30 months to raise the 15 million. 30 months is averagely 3 years. And then to put up a house, even if you're just doing a 2-room and its cost, and we've had several discussions on that, and you need 30 million or 50, which is very basic, you would need twice that time to gather that money. So there's been a complaint about our real estate market in Uganda. We must understand that we have a 2.4 million housing deficit in Uganda right now, that people are struggling to get where to do business and where to sleep. One of the most densely populated places in Kampala, this is Chiganda Kasokoso, has land that belongs to National Housing that was supposed to do construction, low-cost housing for these people, but now people have agreements and all over. It's like a big mess. Now, in one of the things that has been discussed, and we've done that before, is the valuation of land that is not reflective of the other sectors of the market in Uganda. To say if you're going to Kololo and you're telling me that 100 by 100 plot in Kololo is $3 million, by the way, that is true. Sometimes without a house, it's just a bare 100 by 100 plot and someone puts it on the market for $2 million. Someone got $2 million and went to America, they can forge around and get their citizenship, and they can use that money. They get a job, take out a mortgage, maybe for 20 years, and they'll live a very comfortable life. But here it's just buying bare land. And I think it's a joke that, it's not actually a joke, it's a serious issue. When Tinyafuza was talking about, it's General Sejusa, after the deed poll, where he was saying that the ownership of Kololo changes names depending on who is in government. That when Obote had come, you would hear names close to that region. When Amini came, you would hear names close to that region. And then the coming in of the NRM, it's one of the things that led him into trouble. When he packaged it like that, you know who owns Kololo and what. Which leads me to the discussion and my standpoint that our real estate prices are more influenced because of political money than the forces of market demand and supply. Because if in the outskirts, like let's say Chira, a 50 by 100 plot in Chira currently is around 120 million. If you go to Chijabijo, Gayaza, maybe 45 and 50 thereabouts. But the real value of that property should be maybe 15 million or 20 or something. But because we have a lot of corruption money, and because we have people who are rewarded, that the money that I told you of saving because of your salary, if you're earning 1 million, to squeeze in and save 500,000, which is not possible. Maybe if you're earning 1.5 and you're saving 500, you would need 36 months to save that money. But someone will go to mobilize for NRM, and somehow on the supplementary budget from State House will get that money in a one-off. They put it in a bag and say, go and reward ghetto youth, and he will take that money home. That guy, when you tell him a 50 by 100 plot in Gayaza is 60 million, wallahi, he will pay for that plot. Because it's not reflective of hard work, it's corruption money, it is political money. So when a neighbor in that plot hears that, hey, plots around have risen from 15 to 50, he will do the same. And now you who has been earning clean money through business, through the hustle and bustle, through employment, it is very hard for you to save up and match what has been repeated. The condominium development, which is a surge in the central business district and even in the outskirts, with medium housing in Nalia, in Munyonyo, Bugolobi, Muyenga, and then the high class also, depending on the apartments. A 2-bedroomed apartment in Nalia would go for 265 million. That's on a condominium, to get a condominium title. A similar one in Munyonyo or Muyenga would go for around 350. 3-bedroomed house, it can even go to 450, depending on the area. Now, someone says, and you know also our thinking that if you want to tell your villagers that you're doing well, they can't find you. You can't convince them that you have a title of a condominium. They want to find you in a bungalow with a gateman opening the gate with like a compound for children to play and stuff like that. So you can't explain to them that this thing that looks like a rental is your property. But I'm talking about the overpricing. I digress. So that money might give you 2 apartments in a Savo project in Kenya instead of 1 in Uganda. What happened is that when the Indians who are developing condominiums in Kenya did that surge and there was an expansion of the city, they realized they had built more than the market could take and the price fell. The problem with Uganda is that if you know who's buying these condominiums, most of them, their payment plan is that you put down 30% payment and then you can pay in the next 24 months and close. People who can own such a short-term mortgage are very few who can afford by the reflection of a state that does not have a minimum wage, the average earning of someone in the first 5 years after campus in Uganda, how many are employed. We did a story here last week where we were saying that 51 statistics of the government, not made up because it was said by a minister on a public platform, that 50% 51% of the youth in Uganda are neither in education or working. Now, what that means is that, and this is the other perspective, if the minister says that 51% of Ugandans are not working and not in education, but then the youth form over 70% of the population. If you're changing a policy, why are you not fronting the youth as your number one target priority? If you're building these things, who are going to afford them? Because they are not working, they're not in education, they are stranded beings without direction of policy by the state. Would such person benefit in parish development model, for example? I doubt. So to solve this, and one of the things that have determined the real estate market in Uganda was the lack of long-term mortgages. In first world, it's very normal for someone to have a mortgage because once you start working, you can take on a mortgage as long as they can prove that you can support it. And it can even take 15 years or 20 and you're paying the mortgage. In the Ugandan market, it's very hard to get a long-term mortgage. Our financial institutions have been giving maybe 24 months, 36, and on double figures of interest. That's maybe 12% per month or something, which is very high. Now, the disadvantage with the other markets out of the world is that mortgage for 20 years, someone can even be in a single figure interest of even as low as 7%. What happens with that is the banks can't afford to give long-term loans in Uganda because they only depend on customer deposits. You are smiling because you also know your saving culture as you watch this. That once you put your 1 million and you're paid on Salo, and that 1 million or 12 million, whichever you're working, you're using basically that money with no saving scheme. And it's very highly likely that 6 million that you have put on your current account on the 1st of March, you will have used that patch by the 1st of June. So the banks cannot use customer deposits to now give long-term mortgages to other clients who want to take on because they know the customers will come back for the money. So the gap has been caused because we do not have in our market mortgage refinancing. To solve that problem, the parliament debated a very good bill. And this week, the president assented to it, and it's now law. That is the Mortgage Refinancing Institutions Act of 2025. That creates for mortgage refinancing institutions. The mortgage refinancing institutions would be coming to lend to the banks, tier 1, tier 2, maybe tier 3, to be able to give mortgages. So a refinancing institution can come and give maybe a pool of 5 million US dollars to a DFCU, a housing finance, a Stanbic bank to give mortgages of a longer term, because for them, the shorter period that they can calculate for returns is maybe in patches of 5 years, as opposed to the bank depending on customer deposits. The law is very good because for the first time, even for people who wanted to enter the market and internationals, whenever they knew that there was an opportunity in Uganda and there was no law, there was a lacuna in law to govern, they would jump out. But this law would at least give them some comfort that we can open refinancing or pre-financing of mortgages in Uganda, and there's a regulatory compliance in place and a law that can govern that business. The minimum capital was, I think, set at 35 billion if you want to enter the business, and regulation, constant reporting to Bank of Uganda to ensure that the market, because in some of the first world markets, if the mortgage market is affected, definitely the whole economy is affected. And we hope that it will be one of the steps in the right direction to us solving the housing problems, in light of the other things that we need to consider, the land question, the inflation, the unemployment, that we'll need to look into and find solution thereabouts. Around the same day, the president also signed the Valuation Act. Now, the Office of the Chief Government Valuer in Uganda is embedded with the obligation to value property and land. If you've ever bought a plot, regardless of how much you have bought it, at the point of transfer, the Chief Government Valuer gives it a value, and you pay stamp duty of 1.5% on that property. Now, the act comes to set in an institution for training of valuers, and also the mod emphasize what is in the already existing acts on valuation to ensure that there are no hypes here and playing around with the paper that we have seen before. On the same day, we also had the Building Control Amendment Act. Previously, there was a Building Control Act that also has the National Building Review Board, establishes it, and the standards of buildings. This comes in the wake of buildings that were collapsing within Kampala and also in Uganda, leading to fatalities. Now, this sets the system of licensing, inspection, what standards, and etc. that is expected to be taking place before a permit is given, occupation permit and also a construction permit. So it's a very good addition in the right direction, but as I've always debated, Uganda's problem is not about the laws. It's about implementation and the gap that is created by corruption. Because whilst we have laws that talk about you not building without a plan, guys know who to see to build without a plan. And it's like every law presents an opportunity for a government official to make some money on the side. It's that people will intentionally not comply because they know it's cheaper to bribe than to comply. So they just take the shortcut and it moves on. It's been there with permits. It's been there with inspection of different places. It's been there with UNBS officials. It's been there all over and all around. Ministry of Health for clinics and licenses, National Drug Authority. We can go on and on that if the problem of corruption is not solved, we have a problem that will stay. Now, the other issue that we can discuss about the real estate market that made news this week was also the demand that as we talk about designing the city and also the different residential areas, let's make normal the art of minimum construction standards within the city center and zoning. Those are two different but interrelated. If you're building an arcade in town and you know that most people drive and we don't have a railway system, how do you expect to build a residential place that has 350 occupants, but the parking spots without a basement are just 20, even for hotels? At the point of approval of plans, what is the plan that KCCA is approving, or Machinde Division or Machinde Sabagabo that is approving, that does not answer one of the basic architectural or structural designs that we can talk about? You're not dealing with parking. Some of the buildings that are 5 or something floors do not provide for persons with disabilities, no lifts, no nothing, and this keeps on going on and on. If someone bought property in the early 2000s in Bugolobi knowing that it was a residential area, if they wake up from a coma right now or they are returning in the country and find how many bars are on Bandali or whatever, they will be shocked. We don't have zoning. Next, you will set up a residential house and it's all fine. And on the left, a church will start. On the right, a welding workshop will start. And behind, the neighbor will put a piggery farm or start milling maize. And there's no organization whatsoever on who can do what. And it is frustrating. Even properties that should be commercially viable are not. And people are running away from that real estate market to go and invest in Dubai, to go and invest in Kenya. And yet all those are structural problems that can be solved by policy, by government stepping in. So whilst these laws were signed and there is some hope, there's a lot to look at that affects the market, and we need to do the needful. I will leave that on that and pick the mind of the different stakeholders and even yourself if you have a comment on what can be done to sober up what is not right that I've just talked about. Topic number 5. Guys, I need some water at this rate because while we talk about real estate, there are people who have no need for rent because they are sleeping in prison. And one of the hottest topics this week has been the negotiation for political prisoners. Let me give you perspective. The NUP said that over 2,000 people were arrested on the campaign trail in the concluded election. Over 2,000 people. I know we've mentioned the word 2,000 a lot in this episode because even the people who have been arrested as per the police spokesperson in the surge of crime rate rise in Uganda, in Kampala, in the last 2 weeks is 2,000. But let's just think about now people we know as political prisoners, because they were arrested in the wake of a campaign trail. The charges are not known. Some of the people who were influential or who are going to be influential on the campaign trail were like picked. Like it was strategic to say that by the time the state picked the NUP spokesperson, Olivia Lutaya, Eddie Mutwe, the vice presidents, whether it was for illegal drilling or what, they knew this was the force that was going to reckon, to be reckoned with as far as Chagulanyi campaign is concerned. So to pick them before the election, of course, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but those are political prisoners. You have, I've just mentioned examples, still people who were arrested in the wake of the 2021 elections, and the most notable name is Yasin, commonly known as Machete, who has been there. By history, in the middle, we had Honorable Baramba Rugahara saying that the opposition was using these people as bait and that they were going to negotiate for their release. Terms for negotiation was that, as the president put it, they repent that they were misled, we forgive them. So they had to enter a plea of guilty and then they would pardon them. Of course, working with the office of the DPP and the Attorney General. So scores of them were released, including, I've used the name, Olivia Lutaya. People who said, I cannot say I committed a crime I never committed to get out of prison because it's going on my criminal record. You've called me a terrorist. You've called me someone who has been spreading hate. I didn't do that. People who never signed any deals, their trials have never started and they are still on remand. That was the arrest before the 2021 elections. We have had other people join them and they are still languishing in prison. Now, one of the people that recently left the Forum for Democratic Change, Yusuf Nsibambi, claimed that among the things they were negotiating with the president was the release of these political prisoners. They actually don't call them political prisoners. For them, they keep saying the so-called political prisoners. So he says that for the first batch, they were going to release 80 people. And most of them were from, of course, the NUP camp, being the strongest opposition candidate, and of course, with the most victims. One thing that we must discuss is that the condition for their release was for them to apologize and say that they were misdirected by the NUP setup. Is it a strategy or is it surrender? If we are to follow the same strategy, and this is why I have an issue, is that if you keep pardoning, one of the people that were pardoned was Olivia Lutaya. Where is she right now? She's back in prison by the same. If you're not fixing the system, you are not fixing the problem. Because people are just riding on political capital to get a temporary solution to a bigger issue that will still keep going on and on. Now, comments from the notable figures in the NUP, like the Secretary General, the Leader of Opposition, the National Treasurer, Benjamin Katana, were saying that this is a system issue and there's no reason these guys who are saying that they didn't commit anything should first confess that they did it for them to be released. If you're negotiating, say these are political prisoners, and then just release them. Just release them and then go on with your life instead of making them first confess. And then the Sibambis and the other group, he emphasized this point when he was talking on the Uganda Law Society holds a weekly brief for the Radical New Bar. And he was one of the panelists that were speaking there, emphasizing how the opposition is getting money and funders because of these political prisoners, and that's why they don't want them released, and they should work with government, let them confess and be released. But we are sowing dangerous seeds for we are surrendering to a government that is doing something wrong. If these people were charged with something, Bring them to trial. If there's a case to answer, let them answer and release those who will be found not guilty. But for you to hold on for people who have been in there since as early as 2020, there's no charge, and you're talking about forgiveness, you're talking about confessing that they were misled, you're talking about calling them terrorists. It's something wrong and that we are uploading. It actually gets me to a related topic for Nsibambi, who was actually talking about Bobi Wine and calling him home to come back home. Actually, by the time you watch this, Bobi Wine has already said that somehow also the wife and the children escaped the house and they are out of the country. He's also no longer in the country, that is still guarded by military men. In one of the briefings that was done by the minister, Okero Oryem, said that Bobi Wine is a terrorist and they cannot appear and he needs to come and answer. The other side of the government is saying that they are not looking for Bobi Wine. You have people who have left the opposition and joined NRM saying, Bobi Wine, please come back home. We need you on the forefront of fighting for people who are believing in your cause. What is what? Why are we blaming the victim? Why are we making the victim fall into a trap that we know where it will lead? So this discussion of us shifting the attention from the wrongs the government is doing, and we are shifting it to the victims or people who should be beneficiaries of a perfect system. It is myopic. It should be discouraged. It should not even be coming out of the lips of people, whether you're speaking for government or not, because it's a wrong narrative and we are falling prey to it by speaking and now changing the narrative from what the government is doing wrong to how the victim reacted. We can't talk about how the victim reacted if we do not emphasize that what they did to them was wrong, and it is still very wrong. So one of the things that we need to watch and see how it falls, and we'll wait to see when the 80 will be released and the next batch of 120 that was talked about in the alleged negotiations with the government to release political prisoners. We wait and we tell you to watch that story. We'll see how it unfolds. As also we condemn people who have been on remand for a long period of time without trial. People who are held incommunicado. We've had a gentleman come out to say that, for example, they knew they were once held where Sam Mugumya is. No charge, no nothing. It's a state institution. And those things keep going. And the problem is that we have normalized things that should not be normalized. We condemn with the strongest terms what the government is doing as far as the mockery of Article 28 of the Constitution is concerned. And we will look and continue to mention these things that are wrong until something is done about them and some people are punished in the process. I will close it at that. Now, the crime surge, I've hinted a little bit. I don't want to talk more about that. What I can tell you about the crime surge, I know everyone who's been moving on traffic is looking on the side. People grabbing phones, bodas waiting for you when you reach the gate as you're waiting to hoot. People have to call when they are approaching their homes to say, I'm about to reach you open in 2 minutes, so that they enter quickly. Like that has become the norm in Kampala and in the outskirts. Nansana, Machinde, Mutungo. Like there was that surge. Bodas clobbering people, pavers hitting windscreens, and people being victims. So we talked about how the commanders were changed. 2, we have talked about how over 2,000 people have been arrested by the CID all over Kampala in following that crime surge. I can also tell you that there was a closed door meeting where the chief CID met the different security agencies to see what was going on and how it could be, how they could find a solution to this crime surge. And one of the things that were discussed was, instead of waiting for crime to happen, let there be deployment, use intelligence as people plan in camps in different places. They are arrested so that they arrest the situation before it gets out of hand. So we wait to see that, and we commend the police for taking steps, even belatedly, but to make sure that this is changed, and we hope to see the fruits thereof. That's what I can say about the crime rate surge within Kampala, and the update that we have on that. So topic number 7, last but not least, we are discussing what has been going on in the court corridors, and we have 3 study points. 1, I will summarize these ones. The Molly Katanga case, the biggest murder case that we saw last year and this year crossing, was the murder of city businessman Katanga, who was allegedly, according to the DPP and the prosecution, murdered by the wife and assisted by the 2 daughters and 1 shamba boy. Those are the 4 people that are facing trial for the murder of that businessman. Of course, there was an attempt to do state intervention because both of them were connected somehow to the powers that be. But the president apparently said, let justice take its course. As we speak, Mole Katanga did get bail and she is in prison, but the 2 daughters and the shamba boy got bail and have been appearing physically for trial at the High Court Criminal Division, while Mole Katanga has been following the proceedings on Zoom. Now, in criminal law, there's what we call no case to answer. At the stage of the hearing where the state or the people or the DPP has closed the hearing of its case, it has to convince court that it has discharged its obligation to prove that there's some mulamwa in the case before they are put to the defense. So sometimes when the DPP presents a case and then you realize it's a very weak case, the judge can say, it's a very weak case, we don't have to put the defense on the defense, I have dismissed. That's what they call a no case to answer. This week, the ruling for a no case to answer came up in that case, and Justice Kanya, who's the sitting judge in the matter, ruled that the state had proved a plausible case that Mole and the other 3 accused have to defend themselves to this alleged murder of the late husband and father and businessman. We wait to see that story, and the defense that is led by, I think, Peter Kabasi and the 2 lawyers, Jet Tumwebaze and Karuhanga Ellison, I've asked, I think, up to the 20-something of March 29th to be able to start the hearing of the defense to defend it. You need to follow up that case because it has one of the most intricate ballistic evidence that you can hear about in a Ugandan case: gun residue, who did what, then position of the body, victim, and etc. So you will need to dig deep into that, but we'll keep you giving updates on that case. 2, still in court, the Supreme Court, it okayed the withdrawal of the election petition, number 1 of 2026, that was filed by Robert Kasibante. We talked about that, how they had filed an application to withdraw the election petition. And ladies and gentlemen, fellow countrymen, the election process of the presidential election is deemed concluded. Because the petition that had been filed by Robert Kasibante, Supreme Court has okayed the application to withdraw it, with each party to bear its own cost, and it's a futile exercise that is done and closed, and Museveni is set to be gazetted and set for swearing in some date to come after you eat your Easter and Eid meals, thereabouts. So that is done and dusted, and you should be aware not to waste and wait for further updates. Of course, the NRM guys were complaining of why you are not awarding us costs. We spent money, lawyers and what, but the justices of the Supreme Court allowed the application to withdraw with no orders to cost paid to the government, the NRM, and the Electoral Commission. I hope you have any information on that. Finally, in the court corridors, Besigye's case was adjourned to the 12th of March in 2026 for scheduling. It was adjourned because, still about criminal law, in the spirit of Article 28 of the Constitution that talks about right to a fair hearing, is that no one should be charged of a crime without presenting their case, which plants in the importance of the notion of discovery. Before you defend yourself or start the hearing of the case, the state is supposed to gather all the evidence it has against you and give it to you, whether in document, paper, witnesses, etc. And at that point, that's when they can start the hearing. The state was supposed to hand over these documents to Besigye's lawyers by the 3rd. They did not. And when the matter came up in court, in the course of this week, they said they needed to plant on some CDs and flash disks. That was not done. And court, I think, gave them up to the 3rd. And on 12th, it will come back again for scheduling to know which evidence the state is proceeding and how to handle that case. Still, Besigye and Obed Lutare are on remand. They come. Besigye under ailment with weak health. We've had episodes of him being taken to hospital under tight security and coming back. We've had the spouse complaining how, of course, he does not have specialized treatment when he needs it, and etc, etc. But those are the 3 major stories that happened in the court corridors. We'll be telling you more how it unfolds. Finally, on our final topic of the day is the diplomatic row that erupted between Sudan and Uganda. When we were recording the last episode, even before the newsrooms covered this, we got a credible source that Hemditi was in the country to see the president. And we broke the story because I think we recorded on Friday afternoon, and that's when he jetted in. Now, those who do not know Hemditi, you would need to watch our previous episodes, but that's the leader of the Rapid Support Forces, a rebel group in Sudan that is trying to overthrow the Khartoum government. Many people have been killed at his hands. There's a claim that is being funded by UAE and that Kenya has a hand. Like, it's a lot of fracas. So amidst all that confusion and what is going on in Sudan, Museveni hosts him and the delegation in Uganda. And guys, Sudan erupted, of course, saying that it was a mockery of democracy for Museveni to hold. They were basically equating as if Sudan had hosted Kony at the peak of the LRA rebel insurgency in the north. And they were saying that what are you communicating by hosting a rebel without our participation? I need to give perspective on this, that during the AU joint joint meeting, there was a communique that was released on the 28th of October 2025, while reacting on the war that was going on in South Sudan. And among the things that were talked about was Museveni to host the parties to talk it out. But one party was hosted. Whether it was a process towards hosting both parties, and there was no heads up that were given to South Sudan, at least as they were claiming in their statements, it led to a diplomatic row. And I hope behind the doors and where the news do not get, some of the communication between the two diplomatic channels have been made, not to taint the picture of unity and union that we talk about, and basic diplomatic roles that can be solved towards the unity of Africa. And that being the last story of what I had for you, and I think made most news in the week, would be closing it at that. I promised 30 or 40 minutes, and that is it or thereabouts. Now, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for giving us your time to watch this episode. Thank you for commenting. And the reminder is that we are on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. This episode runs around the same time that you have, by around Sunday thereabouts, before 6, you always upload the latest episode. And we encourage you to watch and share the link and subscribe so that you get a notification every time an episode is uploaded. And as I said at the very beginning, you are the reason we do this, and we take delight that more of you are watching and leaving your comments, and you feel part of the making, because maybe your part to play in this national transformation is firstly ignited by you knowing what is taking place, and we are here to deliver that package. For giving us your time and your attention, thank you very much for watching this episode. We can't wait to give you more next week, and definitely something is always happening. Have mercy on yourself, extend some grace. As I've said at the beginning, we are all living for the first time. And for our leaders, please remember the mandate more than the paycheck, because of your obligations or faulting them, someone is suffering and a nation is taking a wrong turn. And we implore you to take your office seriously and do the right thing. And for those that are leading institutions, please be someone that will be on the right side of history. And I will leave you with an encouragement to keep watching, to subscribe, and always count on us as the number one source for news that are happening in the Pearl of Africa. Until next week, we are out. God bless you.